Tip-off 7 years ago about a man now being investigated over the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Der Spiegel there is claiming local officers alerted federal detectives to the suspect in 2013. It followed a British police appeal on the German version of Crime Watch. Sky's crime correspondent Martin Brunn says he's now being linked to a number of cases.
There's an awful lot of stuff being said about this suspect. More allegations every day about possible connections with missing children. The truth is, he is a suspect in the Madeleine McCann case, but there is only at this stage a circumstantial case against him.
That's your news update. It's just gone 2 minutes past 3.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. For our lowest car insurance price guaranteed, go online to the aa.ie.
Tonight will be mainly cloudy with some clear spells. It'll be drizzly along western and northern coast. Lows of between 7 and 10 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Juff and Heskey.
And you are welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through till 5 o'clock in the company of the Irish Independent football correspondent Daniel McDonnell and the broadcaster and journalist Johnny Ward. Remember, our football coverage brought to you thanks to Paddy Power. For more information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net. Our text number is 53106 at a cost of 30 cents. You can tweet us at Off the Ball. You can watch us as well on YouTube, Facebook, on Periscope, on the new Go Loud app for OTB Sports. We're really excited about that being launched this week. So this year's World Cup Revisited, our 12th episode, if I'm right. I'll have to go back and check that. It might be 13th or 12th, but I'll check that. That's not really important. But what is important is we're going to have a great chat over the next couple of hours about Argentina 1978. I wasn't old enough to remember it because I only arrived in October of that year. But as a tournament that is so controversial, so much political, societal issues to speak about, obviously the football as well. Guys, I'm really looking forward to this, and also discussing the other issues in football that have gone on through the week. We had John Egan on the show. We'll hear from him a little bit later on. He spoke to Nathan Murphy on Thursday night. We got the Bundesliga going on. We got the 2,000 guineas. We'll give you the result of that as well. But lads, we didn't make it to Argentina. We weren't on the boat like the Scots were because as usual with Ireland back then, we had dodgy refereeing decisions. We had France, we had Bulgaria in our group, and it just didn't work out for John Giles, who quit soon after.
Yeah, it is sort of another, as you say, another tale, John, of Irish woe. And it's strange. I think actually when, obviously the famous Irish breakthrough game was Bulgaria 1987, when Gary Mackay got the winner for Scotland in Bulgaria. And I think from sort of skimming through coverage of that time, a lot of people assumed that just there's no way that a Bulgarian team needing to go through at home would struggle, would fail to do it, because of, perhaps from the Irish memory, some legacy of some dodgy decisions in Bulgaria. And 10 years previously, as you mentioned, it was a 3-team group. Albania dropped out, withdrew. And Ireland, you had a good Irish side. You would have had, as you mentioned, John Giles, who was on the way out subsequently, but you had Liam Brady coming towards his pomp, Frank Stapleton, really good players. And, they were capable of beating France at home, who were a top side at the time. But it seemed like the away game in Bulgaria, a disallowed goal. I think it was even the French manager, Hidalgo, was there and couldn't believe some of the decisions. And that sort of left Ireland behind the 8 ball a bit. Now, they did lose in Paris. I think there was some contention over maybe aspects of that. And they couldn't beat Bulgaria at home at the end of the day. So maybe it wasn't, it's not maybe a scandal like the Belgium one a couple of years later, but nonetheless, again, it feels like a lot of these 70s, early 80s Ireland stories could have been different.
Yeah, I don't think FIFA cared, lads, about Ireland until Italia 90, and they saw what our supporters brought to the tournament and how well received we were because of the way we behaved, and we really lit up the tournament from a fan's perspective. I almost think they didn't care about little old Ireland until then.
Yeah, and there were a lot of conspiracy theories, I suppose, around football, which we'll definitely get to, because this World Cup was laden with a lot of dodgy stuff going on, really, and that definitely extended to Ireland's group. Now, whether they were just unfortunate or whether there was something more sinister going on in some of the games, but, John Giles had taken over from Liam Toohey, and Liam Brady was becoming a bit of a tour de force around that time, and Giles paid a lot of tribute to Toohey, where he brought the Irish team. They had serious players at that time and beat France 1-0 in Lansdowne Road an unbelievable roar from the crowd. I suspect Ireland weren't playing in Lansdowne very long at that stage, but Liam Brady basically ran through the French defence and scored an unbelievable goal. And as Dan kind of alluded to there, the game in Paris, John Giles, the player manager, would say subsequently that they had a goal really, really wrongly disallowed when the game was 1-0, and the French got a second goal. So 2-0 was quite flattering to the French. The problem, I suppose, for Ireland in that group was the fact that it was that 3-team group, which I think is really, really unfair, because you have no margin for error, especially if things go against you, for only one team to qualify. And as much as France didn't have a great World Cup, they were a serious up-and-coming side, particularly with the young Michel Platini at that time. But Ireland didn't beat Bulgaria at Lansdowne Road. They were then sort of reliant on going over to Sofia, and it was almost thought it was a bit of a fait accompli that you just didn't get decisions over there. So they missed out, and this was on the back of a very exciting campaign for the Euros previously, which also resulted in failure. But Ireland weren't there. Scotland were the only team representing the home nations, as they called them. And Scotland didn't quite live up to expectations. But this was a pretty mad World Cup, John, and on an awful lot of levels as we go through over the next hour and a bit.
Yeah, the team that beat France, lads, Mick Kearns, Paddy Mulligan, David O'Leary, Jimmy Holmes, Mick Marsh and Steve Highway, Liam Brady, Johnny Giles, Jerry Daly, Don Givens and Ray Tracy, some top players. Yeah,
and that was around the time that Giles was already coming back to Shamrock Rovers, and this was, it's like there's so, as we sort of alluded to there, there's so many false starts in Irish football, prior to, I suppose, the international breakthrough 10 years after this, which was in some respects a false start too, because we didn't really build structures upon it. But at an international level, and you mentioned some of those players again, O'Leary, Jerry Daly was coming along. Like, you would have, like, if Ireland had qualified for tournaments in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, when you look at where these players were, how a lot of them were getting on in their club careers, they would have done okay. I mean, it was harder to qualify for tournaments. We sometimes talk about that era maybe in the context of failure, whereas obviously now you can have 24 teams in the Euros. Now I know,
and there was only 16 in that World Cup as well.
Yeah,
it was the last 16-team World Cup.
Yeah, and listen, I know that the split of the USSR and Yugoslavia has made, has created new nations and just made it more competitive. And 3-team groups or 4-team groups are a product of just, there was only around over 20 something teams in UEFA at the time. I think there was like 107 teams tried to qualify for this World Cup, where there'd be 211 trying to qualify for a FIFA one now. So, the failure then by scale, might be equivalent still to qualification or very, very close to qualification now. But it could have been different because, and we'll touch on it with Scotland. I mean, and England didn't qualify. And didn't qualify for 74 either. And the Scotland team that did qualify, and I'm sure we will chat about them, I mean, they would have had a really elite team, because English teams around that time, were the kings of Europe. You had Nottingham Forest winning the European Cup. Ireland's players would have been playing at a similar level and in and around that company. So they wouldn't have been out of place in those tournaments at all.
Yeah, one of the great things about these World Cup chats we've had over the last few weeks is the way that organically interaction has really sparked them and really been the key to them. Hi, John. This is on 53106 for our texts and add off the ball on Twitter. Hi, John. Watching the FIFA film of 78 pitches seemed bad, even for 1978, and not much flair on show, maybe because of it. And Scotland doing a Scotland again. Poor Adi MacLeod got some stick after that, I recall. That is from Mark in Tala. Hi, lads. I'm 55 in West Cork. I fell in love with the game in 1978. The ticker tape, Luque, Kempes, Aussie, the Dutch, Argentina against Peru. Porter Cronin in 1978 featured the first World Cup finals win for an African team in Tunisia, beating Mexico 3-1. They also drew with West Germany but didn't get out of their group. The long-range goals for Holland against Italy were also highlights. The first World Cup I've got a proper memory of. And Dan O'Callaghan, my parents brought me and my 3 siblings to a mobile home in Wexford in the family saloon with the family TV. So we wouldn't miss any of that World Cup, which was on RT, I remember. I think Eamon Dunphy was on the panel with Bill O'Hurley at the time. So your TV, folks, beginning to get colour, and you got the BBC and you got David Coleman and you got John Motson. And let's actually hear about this, Scott. So let's hear David Coleman's description of Archie Gemmell's goal against Holland in the group stage.
Okay. Hip it! 1-0. made that, battling through. Luque battled with Grant for it. Sent it through to Kempes. Kempes through the gap and into the net. Kennedy. There's an argument going on with the referee, between Rioch and the referee. Just wants to get on with it. Gamble. Good play by Gamble. And again. 3-1. A brilliant individual goal by this hard little professional has put Scotland in dreamland. The miracle is beginning to happen. They need one more to qualify. And Gamble, first one, then two. Then he faced up his own player and another defender. He was clear, and finishing like this is lethal.
David Coleman was so iconic, guys. We played him twice there. Mario Kempes, we get the drift. Mario Kempes and then Archie Gamble's goal against Holland. So let's speak about the Scots. Ali MacLeod, his success at Ayr United and Aberdeen. They knocked the European champions Czechoslovakia out of qualifying. They edged Wales to qualify. They'd beaten England 2-1 at Wembley in 1977. They had great players like Kenny Dalglish, Graham Souness, who inexplicably wasn't picked in the game against Peru. But there was all these ads. It was like, commercial advertising was being done by the manager and the players. His wife was doing ads for the Co-op. It was a real hype machine from Scotland, and classically for the Scots, it turned into a tragic farce.
Yeah, sorry, Dan. Yeah, they kind of screwed up basically by losing against Peru. And as you referenced there, JD, the decision was made initially not to play Souness, and Souness had a major hand when he actually did play in the tournament. This Scottish team was accused of being confident, bordering on even arrogant. And I suppose it being the only team from the British Isles as well, they had the weight of Britain somewhat behind them. And as you mentioned there, they were kind of celebrities. There was a lot of stuff going on that I think managers nowadays would absolutely scoff at, even nowadays. And they came into the group with high hopes, but they came up against Cabillas, who was probably, I think just reading on him today, he's deemed like the best player maybe Peru have ever produced. And it wasn't a bad Peru side who played a key role in the tournament for good and bad reasons. Scotland lost that. They were slightly on the back foot after that, but they had seriously outstanding players, and one of those teams that kind of could have gone a long way in the tournament if they'd gotten out of the group, because as much as Argentina won this tournament, and we've so much to talk about here. You mentioned everyone watching it on TV. This was, as you say, the first colour TV World Cup, and the whole background behind the Argentina at that time. But it wasn't a great Argentina side. They did have Kempes, but Maradona was left at home. They completely rode their luck in the tournament. And Scotland would definitely, it was one of these times again when they went out on goal difference. But ultimately what did them was that game against Peru, which they lost the first game in the tournament that they played.
Yeah, I think the thing is, like, the Scots, I mean, every time we talk about the Scots in this series, we're sort of, here we go with Scotland. I think this is almost the peak Scotland one, because this was like Ali's army. And you alluded to it there, John, all the sponsorship deals that they did. There was with Chrysler cars. I think his wife was involved. He was speaking about, making comments about winning the World Cup. And this goes back to Ali MacLeod, like the start of his reign. I think even when Scotland went to play Wales in a friendly, and Wales again, had some very top players, and his opening gambit was along the lines of, well, I only know one of these Welsh players. I've only ever heard of one of them. I mean, he's from Scotland. It's not as if you're coming from Brazil, So there was, it's the type of stuff that it was almost like Roddy Collins-esque stuff from the late 90s, early 2000s. Some of the stuff that almost sort of made a rod for his own back, pardon the pun. But there is.
You've been waiting all day to say that, haven't you?
I actually haven't. It's worryingly.
Don't believe
worryingly, Johnny.
Don't believe.
But that overconfidence also had a. There was actually that was tied in with their performance in terms of research and homework. There was I think a couple of months previously, there was I think a TV station had an all expenses paid trip lined up to go and watch Peru play a friendly. And basically, Ali MacLeod didn't turn up. I think he had some corporate engagement back in Scotland, and as a result, didn't do the homework on Peru, who I think they just dismissed as not being very good. I think even before the first game against Peru, he spoke about the danger of one of their players and how it would be a challenge for Martin Buchan. And he basically had the wrong side. He was talking about, the left back, when he should have been talking about the right back. Basically, that was the extent. But yeah, some of the stuff. I mean, there was the World Cup song. I think even at one point,
that song was actually very, very, very similar to the Horselips one we did in 1990. We're all part of Addy's army. I was wondering where it came from. It's pretty much the same song.
But even of the time, I think they ended up shilling some basically cigarettes. Like, so they actually were involved in a pro-smoking campaign. And I think the comment that there was a Scott Murray piece in the Guardian, and MacLeod's line was, "Several of our players smoke, so it would be untruthful to back an anti-smoking campaign," he said. So, I mean, they had
a few issues going on.
Willie Johnston being another one. So they lose 3-1 to Peru. Don Masson misses a penalty. Should have played Souness, didn't play Souness. It was a European Cup winner with Liverpool that season. Kubias, who played in the 1970 World Cup, as you're saying there, Johnny, swerving free kick, a hard show for the Scots. And then
that free kick that you mentioned, John, actually, that it was the Roberto Carlos anniversary there. What was it, 23 years was it? This week from that unbelievable goal that he got in that tournament. The Tournoi. Yeah. That goal by Kubias, you're talking about a completely different ball. It was an outside of the foot around the wall, and I'd never seen it before. And I was kind of thinking, this is a goal that deserves an awful lot. In fairness to this tournament, there were some great strikes from outside the box. Totally different football, much harder to do it back then. And Kubias' goal against the Scots was outrageous. Like, it's well worth looking up if you haven't seen it.
53106. Remember Scotland's abysmal performances against Peru and Iran, and then the Scotland are in dreamland commentary like it was yesterday. That is from Sean. Well, folks, you brought back a memory of how World Cups influenced street football. For months afterwards, everyone would shout, "Murphy, 1-0, to be like David Coleman. That is from Dave in Bray. So 1-1 against Iran was just an absolute nightmare, and they need, as we just heard from David Coleman there, to beat the Dutch by 3 clear goals to qualify for the second group stage, which was effectively the last 8. And they beat Holland 3-2, but it wasn't enough. It's just an iconic goal from Archie Gemmell, who was playing for Nottingham Forest at the time, league champions in 1978 in England, slaloming through the Dutch defenders and sweeping it home. But the Scottish fans, all of those had travelled, like they were just, they turned on the players, they were making gestures at them. A brick was thrown through the window of the Scottish FA. You kind of laugh about it now, but I'm sure at the time, if you were a Scot, it wasn't very funny.
But they have an ability, though, the Scots, to lose the run of themselves around their national team, and it's sort of quite endearing. Like, it is like and we can be a small bit like it, but with the Scots, it's probably another level because it is probably a much more passionate football country, really. And they around that time they'd won the home championships. I mean, Johnny keeps referring to the home nations and sticking us into it. We're going to get a couple of complaints about that, but there was the home nations, which we very much weren't in. But Scotland.
There is a complaint.
Yeah, just to be clear.
Home nations, British Isles, iconic David Coleman. Is this a BBC satellite? You could not make it up. Is it 1920?
There was home nations last week. I wouldn't mind. I know a young Johnny Ward used to have tricolours all over his website, so I'm shocked by this. But anyway, we were not very much not a home nation. But Scotland did win it around that time, and the fans were very much drank in the moment in every sense of the word. But then the disappointment was so crushing. But even like Scotland haven't qualified for a major tournament since 1998, which is ludicrous. When you consider, again, like that it is a proper football country, like the highest attendances per capita in Europe, and has produced great players over the years. And John Giles did his team during the week, which sort of illustrates that fact. And they haven't been in a tournament for 22 years. And even in Euro 2016, they just couldn't help themselves because Ireland were in the qualifying group. And there was that time Scotland drew in Dublin in June 2015. And there was like Scottish players and fans and journalists on about booking their holidays in France the next summer and all this type of stuff. Like they have an ability to to really get ahead of themselves very quickly for some reason. And it comes back to them.
In fairness to them, Dan, at that stage, if this were a Scottish team that was good enough to beat the Netherlands 3-2 and that unbelievable goal from Gemmell, and like I spoke to Peter Fitzpatrick, a good buddy of mine, a Shamrock Rovers fan, so he's one of the old enough to text when we get to World Cups in the 70s, and he was telling me, to his mind, the Dutch were the best team in that World Cup. They were kind of jinxed in the final, but Scotland went and scored 3 goals against them. Souness was absolutely imperious in midfield. So the fact that they obviously got 1 point from Iran and Peru ended up topping the group, Scotland would have looked at that game against, despite all of the disastrous preparations for that Dutch game, they nearly pulled it off. And they obviously were probably good enough to go very close in that tournament. They just screwed it up, as Scotland often do.
Yeah, they knocked out the European champions in qualifying. They were the best of the teams, England and Wales. They were the best of them. England didn't qualify, Italy pipped them. Just tactical mistakes, playing Don Masson and Bruce Rioch against Peru, not playing Souness, not playing Gemmell earlier, and they don't qualify. So you've got 16 teams, a cold Argentina, of course, it's winter there. 4 groups initially, seed 4 groups: Argentina, Italy, France and Hungary, Holland, Scotland, Peru and Iran, as we touched upon there, Brazil, Sweden, Spain and Austria, and West Germany, Poland, Mexico and Tunisia. Easy group for West Germany and Poland. Massive areas of the pitch and advertising hoardings behind the goals, nets sloped in an L shape quite significantly, quite an attractive thing to watch, but not the beloved Argentina of 1986 when the dictatorship had finished. So what's the background to this? Well, there was a military coup in Argentina in 1976. You General Jorge Videla's dictatorship. Why did that happen? Well, Juan Perón died in 1974. His wife, Isabelita, who was ruling, lost control. You had a Weimar situation with right-wingers, left-wingers, political assassinations, the aftershocks of the oil crisis, 300% inflation, a recipe for complete disaster when you've already got South American countries having a delicate relationship with democracy anyway, with Brazil already being in a military dictatorship, with the Americans supporting Allende's being deposed in Chile in 1973, with General Pinochet taking over. So you have this pure, Argentina had already been awarded the World Cup back in the 60s, but you had this PR campaign, and you had $700 billion spent by the regime, the junta, on the Argentina World Cup that got protests from Amnesty International. You had 30,000 people murdered over that time. You had torture and detention camps around the stadiums, and you had the mothers of the disappeared walking every Thursday, I think it was, to the Plaza del Mayo. So you had this military dictatorship running the best and the biggest, one of the biggest, and probably the biggest apart from the Olympic sporting events in the world. And it's a crazy time, guys. And what really made me quite sad about when I was doing the research on this is the drugging and throwing political prisoners into the sea. That memory hasn't really left me the last few days.
Yeah, the literally throwing them into the sea with weights around their ankles. This was not a good time to be in Argentina. And, you know, Perón and his wife, whilst they might be slightly controversial figures, they are really, really iconic in Argentina. And I did a bit of research in Argentina of today. And the president of Argentina is from a party that is basically pro-Perón and was kind of born out of the Perón movement. And obviously his wife passed away. But Argentina right now, just like back then, is very, very susceptible to, basically the economy being ruined. But it has managed the coronavirus extremely well. The number of deaths in Argentina is a real credit to the country. I think it's like 320 or something like that. It's very, very small. And meanwhile, Brazil is closer to 12,000. So Argentina is trying to kind of find its rightful place in South America. But at that time, one of the really intriguing things was the logo for that World Cup was essentially based on Juan Perón putting his hands like this, kind of addressing a crowd. So the logo was made whilst he was, if he weren't still alive, his wife was still in power at the time. Then the coup was arranged, and obviously the coup came in, and they realised that the World Cup logo, which is quite an important thing, they realised that it was basically based on the hand gesture of the former leader. So obviously the military coup didn't want anything to do with this, but they found out that it was so costly to change it that it basically wasn't feasible. So they had to reluctantly go along with it. But there are clear echoes of Berlin in 36 here and Mussolini in 34, because in the Berlin Olympics obviously in 36, because it was a very, very dodgy regime, basically trying to legitimise itself. And you mentioned the colour TVs. Spoke to Nathan Murphy's dad, Micheál, before the show, and he was saying it was remarkable because pretty much everyone in Ireland who had a TV, they were colour TVs at that time. So this was a remarkable thing for people to see. But back in Argentina, they still had black and white TVs, despite the fact, as you mentioned, JD, the regime had absolutely lashed money at this. And it got me thinking as well, Argentina now, I think you've been there, Dan, have you?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a country I'd love to go to. But I was just thinking, it must be a fantastic place to go for another World Cup, because Bocan River Plate's average crowds are around about 45,000. I was looking into it. I think 8 of the teams in the Argentinian league have an average crowd of at least 25,000. It's obviously a football mad nation, so it'd be a great place to go back. And if I ever do visit Argentina, I'd love to go for a World Cup, but if it were 1978, I think I'd have deep reservations about going. As you mentioned, JD, 30,000 people, a horrible regime. And we referenced this 2 weeks ago in terms of, there's been a lot of chat about the US, obviously over the past week, but the US was again quite influential in this World Cup in a kind of a strange way, because it helped that regime get into power.
And Henry Kissinger was in the semi-final dressing room. Well, it wasn't the semi-final, but the Peru, when they needed to win by 4 goals, Henry Kissinger and Videla, the dictator, visited the dressing room of the Peruvians. Why?
Yeah, like that's an extraordinary story. Just to roll back a small bit, I mean, it is like there's a brilliant piece by a guy called David Forrest, and he's involved with the In Bed with Maradona website. I think it was reproduced in The Guardian a couple of years back, and he was in Buenos Aires a couple of years back. I think it was like the 40-year anniversary of the World Cup. And actually if people decide to look up the footage of this after our discussion, and they look at the YouTube clips or whatever, you might notice that at the goals all have a black sticker at the bottom of the goalpost. So the white goalposts are all, it's a perfectly shaped, goalpost and crossbar, but at the bottom there's a black sticker on either side of the net. And this author wondered about it for years. Like, what was the story with this black on the goalposts? And he essentially did this piece, David Forrest's piece. He sought to find out the reasons behind this. He went to the ground, went to a museum. He was talking to a waiter in a restaurant one time who said, "You should go and see this person." And they went to the stadium, and they got a tour, and they asked someone about the pictures and said, "What's the story with that little black at the bottom of the goalposts?" And they said, "Well, we can't really talk about this, but here's someone you should ask." And it turned out it was the waiter back in the restaurant who sent him to the stadium, who was part of the ground staff in '78. And effectively, because the regime actually was pretty clueless about football, they only become interested in it in the month or so before the tournament, really. That they were sort of very keen, as you mentioned, for propaganda reasons, to present the best image. And the thing about the goal nets and the shape, there was, the ground staff wanted to make a protest. They wanted to reflect the fact that people in Argentina weren't happy. They thought about carving stuff into the pitch or whatever, but they'd all be killed for that. They'd be taken away and thrown out of the plane. So they decided to tell the regime that it was a football tradition to put these black stickers at the bottom of the goalpost, but they were actually symbolising a black armband. That's what it was. And it was like the ground staff's little gesture to the world that something wrong was going on in Argentina, and people there understood that the black at the bottom of the goalpost was their mark of respect for the people that were being tortured and killed. And also, like, not far from the ground as well. This was the thing. These torture camps were in the centre of the city. They were not out in the countryside. I mean, the shouts, were almost drowned out by the cheers from the stadium. So, I mean, it was a horrendous time. And it's funny, you give that opening speech, John, there, just about the political situation and the dictatorship and, what a country this was. And you're thinking, this is all the ingredients for a place FIFA will bring a World Cup, because that's generally where they bring World Cup.
And it was Havelange's first World Cup. It was João Havelange's first World Cup, but it was given to them in the 60s. But he did nothing about it. It was, we don't get involved in politics. And they were also starting their kind of road towards, what was this? It was a mixture of corporate sponsorship. It was a mixture of global TV, and they didn't want to rock the boat because they had eyes on Spain, they had eyes on Mexico or Colombia in '86, and let's just get this done. Oh, we don't interfere in politics. And that's a very noble thing, but when you see how FIFA then ended up, then you'd have to say that.
But it wasn't noble. It was rubbish.
No.
It was a lie. I mean, the organizer for the competition was assassinated.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Beforehand, and Havelange's politics would have been questionable. I mean, Brazil, who won it in 1970, Brazil was a dictatorship at that time too, and that was, Havelange came from Brazil and that football background. So, FIFA knew what it was at, really. But John's point was about, Argentina is a terrific place, very European. It still considers itself very European. Wouldn't actually be very popular with the other South American nations because they would be viewed as almost the Europeans of South America. But this is why there's going to be a big push for the 2030 World Cup to go to Argentina and Uruguay together, because you can get a boat to Uruguay from Buenos Aires. It's a simple boat across the river, and that's almost like the traditional 100 years on from 1930. And to bring maybe a proper World Cup to Argentina, that's not tainted. But of course, last I heard, our lot are still trying to go in and organise our own bid for that competitions, but. I'd have my view about that. We should concentrate on other stuff.
What I meant there was it's noble for FIFA to say they don't want to get involved in politics and don't get the governments involved, but we know that's not really credible given what happened to them subsequently. But actually, to be fair to the Argentinians, like Cesar Menotti was a chain-smoking leftist. The players, I think, were probably a bit afraid of the situation.
No doubt they were afraid.
So therefore, like Ricky Villa was saying that probably shouldn't have happened. Luque, he definitely had a relation or somebody he knew who was killed. And Ardiles, once again, was just brought into it and didn't really want to comment upon it. And he kind of felt at the time that, look, we just believed what we were. I think they were just effectively of the view that we're going to keep our mouths shut about this.
Yeah, well, you see, that's the thing. The thing about dictatorships, you look at what happens in these countries and you sort of blame the people for going along with it. And how could the Germans let what happened in the war happen? But dictatorships don't work like that. You effectively don't really have a choice. And it would have been very difficult. I imagine a lot of the Argentinian players were abhorrent, really, like absolutely hated the regime. But again, as you mentioned, John, there was probably a fear there. And, if you're to read into this, as generally I think historians have, like there was so much fear, either a fear that actually was justified or a fear that might have been slightly overstated, that there were some games in this tournament that effectively you'd have to look back on and say, well, was that actually a fair result? What happened there? And one of them was obviously Argentina and Peru, which is genuine, is probably roundly concerned, and that was in the second round, to have been a fixed game, because Argentina also, they knew that they could delay the game, so they knew exactly what they wanted points-wise. And so there's a lot of stuff going on, and the Henry Kissinger stuff is absolutely bonkers, but it's sad that that regime was there for that long, because Argentina, like, what a country, and that idea of a World Cup with Uruguay would be amazing. And there are strong Irish links to Argentina as well. Admiral William Brown and even Sarsfield is a name that's fairly common in Argentina. So it's a place that would be amazing if Ireland ever did get to the World Cup there.
Yeah, and also it was actually the Falklands War that put paid to the regime. It wasn't Videla who was in charge by then, but that is actually what precipitated the return to democracy. And as always, it's always been fragile in South America, the actual democratic movement. 53106 for the text. We'll talk about the football after the break. Lawrence says, easily my favourite World Cup, 13 years old, so oblivious to the politics. But what atmosphere, you just had to want Argentina to win. I've been a fan ever since, loved watching Maradona and Messi, but neither as much as this team. Kempes, in block capitals and in exclamation marks. Eamon, the tournament that made me fall in love with football. The fans, the ticker tape, the drama, the controversy, Gemmel's goal, the rock star that was Mario Kempes. Soft spot for Argentina ever since. Derek Foran was 11. Mario Kempes, Argentina, dodgy win against Peru, Archie Gemmel and Johnny Rep for the Dutch. Peter Clark was about to turn 11. Scotland's disaster, the late starting final, the group semi-final format, Ari Hahn's shots, Nelinho's goal against Italy, Quiroga, Cubillas, but most of all the tango ball, the ticker tape, Leopoldo Luque, and that god among men, Mario Kempes. What a summer. Hi guys, I've just qualified for the pension, so you can guess my age. I just moved to Toronto in 1978 when unfortunately CBC went on strike, and subsequently there was no coverage of the games. So me and my brother paid $20 each to watch the final on a big screen at Maple Leaf Gardens, home of Toronto Maple Leafs hockey team at the time. Not very good sound quality, but great atmosphere, and the Toronto Argentine contingent went nuts at the end. Loving the discussion. That is from Tom and Maynooth. 53106 for your text. Off the ball on Twitter. there. This is Off the Ball Saturday. Back after this.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Jeff and Heskey.
Screen Time with John Farty.
This week on Screen Time, I talked to the directors of MacMillions, the documentary about the people who stole millions from McDonald's, all through Monopoly. We bring you more movies, TV shows and documentaries to watch during lockdown. Plus, former Irish and Leinster rugby player Shane Byrne on his favourite movie, and acting without saying anything.
Screen Time with John Farty.
With Elephant and Castle.
Listen and subscribe to the podcast now or tune in this evening from 6.
On News Talk.
QuoteDevil.ie can save you money on your car insurance, van insurance or home insurance. QuoteDevil Home Insurance is so easy. Get a quote in just 60 seconds and purchase cover in 3 minutes.
The Quote Devil's always got one hell of a quote.
QuoteDevil Limited is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Milk meets tea. Yogurt finds fruit. And the cheese makes the toasty. Calcium for bones, protein for muscles, and the vitamins and minerals our bodies need. Quality grass-fed butter for cake making and bread baking. Dairy. Irish, locally farmed freshness. For information on the role of dairy in a balanced diet, visit ndc.ie.
Home. Suale. We're at home a lot these days, but we can still explore with the TG Ceathair player. Explore the home of Irish content. Home to award-winning documentaries, home to critically acclaimed series, home to culture, trad music and sport. Explore Ireland from the comfort of your home. Explore the TG Ceathair Player app. Now available to download for free. Gachot. Worldwide. TG Ceathair. Sunna Suala.
At Skoda, our new ozone sterilization system kills 99% of viruses and bacteria in every car. Good to know when buying an approved used Skoda. And across our new range, get a finance offer from 0% and a 3-month payment holiday. Finance provided by way of hire purchase agreement from Volkswagen Financial Services Ireland and subject to lending criteria. Terms and conditions apply. Visit skoda.ie for further information.
This is Water Safety Ireland with a message for all parents. While schools are closed, teach your children skills at home to last a lifetime. PAWS is Primary Aquatics Water Safety. It's all the basic water safety skills every child needs. It's free for all ages at teachpaws.ie. That's teachpaws.ie, an initiative of the Government of Ireland.
From the apartment in the city to the cottage in the country, at Energia, we're the power behind 250,000 customers across Ireland. And right now, there's never been a better time to join us and save on your electricity and gas with our cheapest dual fuel bundle. Wherever you're living, know you always get the biggest savings by coming direct to us. Go direct to energia.ie and switch today. Energia, the power behind your savings. EAB €1,364 based on average annual usage. 12-month contract, discounted unit rates, standing charge, PSO levy and carbon tax, T's and C's and early termination fee apply. Valid from June 2020 and subject to change. Verification and T's and C's at energia.ie/EAB.
COVID-19 has had a huge impact on our country. But thanks to your patience and sacrifice, many thousands of lives have been saved. And while the virus is not yet gone, we have made enough progress to enter phase 2 of reopening Ireland. It's important that we continue to work together to support each other and our communities. To stay safe, you need to limit where you go and limit the number of people you meet. Here are 5 things you should know for phase 2. 1. You may travel within your own county and up to 20 kilometres from home if crossing county boundaries. 2. Indoor or outdoor social gatherings of up to 6 people and outdoor training activity for up to 15 people are now permissible, while always maintaining social distancing. 3. All retail is reopening, but please shop safely, shop locally, and support businesses in your community. 4. Working from home must continue wherever possible. 5. Please walk or cycle if possible, and only use public transport if absolutely necessary. As Ireland opens up, please remember that social distancing, coughing and sneezing etiquette, and washing your hands regularly are really important things we all must do to make sure the virus does not spread. Stay safe, stay local, we're in this together. Full details of Phase 2 are available now at gov.ie/Phase 2. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
Power City stores are open for customer service and the collection of online orders. So please shop online at powercity.ie, select click and collect, or make use of our home delivery service. For more information, go online to powercity.ie.
Are you preparing to reopen your business? As an employer, you're required to train employees for a safe return to work. Get your business open safely and fully compliant with IACT.ie. IACT's online training program lets your team complete COVID-19 safety and compliance training in advance of returning to work. It's easy, it's fast, and it's essential. Find out more at IACT.ie. IACT, getting Ireland back working safely.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
You are welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through to 5 o'clock in the company of the Irish Independent football correspondent Daniel McDonnell and the broadcaster and journalist Johnny Ward. Our football coverage brought to you with thanks to Paddy Power. For more information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net. You can text us on 53106. You can tweet us at Off the Ball. You can watch us on the Go Loud app. But you should know now by this stage that we have a new OTB Sports app. You can download it at the iOS store or Android. So check out the OTB Sports app and definitely download it. News, analysis, podcasts, interviews. It's a great app and we're really excited about it here this week. Just a text on the 1978 World Cup, our feature year today. The 1978 World Cup, the first one I can remember, the ticker tape thrown onto the pitch before the final was a great sight. If environmentally questionable, Admiral William Brown from Foxford, County Mayo, founded the Argentinian Navy. There are a large number of Argentinians with Irish ancestry. That is from Martian. Well done Off the Ball again. One of the best matches from the tournament was France and Hungary. I wrote my English essay on the match for my inter certificate in English. I also fell in love with the tennis player Gabriella Santini years later. That is from Nolan Kildare. Am I right in thinking that during the World Cup in 1978, at the France-Hungary game, one of the teams had to borrow a strip from the local team because the blue and red jerseys were indistinguishable on a local black and white TV? I remember rightly, the borrowed jerseys were green and white stripes. That is from Daglon O'Kelly. That is correct, Daglon. Danny in Galway, people forget Johan Cruyff pulled out of the 78 World Cup after arguments with management. Also, Franz Beckenbauer had also retired from international football, aged just 32. The Guineas has been won at Newmarket by Cameco. Oisin Murphy, the Kerry champion jockey in England, has won it from Wichita, with Pinatubo the favourite, beaten guys. But Johan Cruyff didn't not turn up in Argentina because there were a row with management. He didn't turn up because he was kidnapped in 1977 in Spain when he was playing for Barcelona at the time. A gun was put to his head. His wife escaped, thankfully, during the incident, and he was under armed guard then for months, and it rattled him, and he wasn't going to go down to South America and leave his family.
Yeah, it's an incredible story, really, because there was obviously a bit of conjecture around, because we spoke about the 74 World Cup a couple of weeks back, and people listened to that series, and obviously there was a talk of some nefarious activities in the Dutch camp toward the final of that competition. And actually, one of the stories was that his wife basically said, "No more World Cups for you." But years later, this story transpired, and I mean there are still people who doubt it, I think, although I don't know, it was quite comprehensive. The incident that happened on the kidnapping, as I mentioned, but people wonder was there other reasons why he didn't want to go, and that's why probably that text comes from, and there's different sort of versions of it out there. But yeah, long story short is, I mean, he didn't go, and Paul Breitner also actually didn't go
the Maoist
for Germany as well. Yeah, who we spoke about him.
My Champions League friend, yeah.
And a couple of people had objections to it, and there was obviously protests and stuff that you mentioned, but yeah, basically, Holland ended up without their best player, yet as Johnny alluded to earlier, they were felt by many to be the best team in the tournament. And I mean, they had the missed chance against Argentina in the final, late on, hit the post, and God, it's just both of those World Cups in the 70s could easily have been a story of Dutch victory and Dutch domination, and a completely different description of that era. But I mean, it was obviously a very European-heavy tournament, just in terms of how the qualification was still structured. Like Tunisia had the first African win, but I mean, there'd be one team representing those continents, and yet, you'd have stacks of European participants by comparison. But that Dutch team did seem to be pick at them. They just couldn't get over the line in final competitions.
I'll just give you that Guineas result in full. Cameco 10-1, Wichita 15-2, Pinatubo, the 6-5 on favourite, was third. So Aidan,
race, John.
Yeah, I'm back Wichita, so I'm kind of anyway.
You told me beforehand, Aidan O'Brien, I was talking to him yesterday, he was very, very confident of a big run from Wichita, and how close he went. As you mentioned, Oisin Murphy, another win for Kingman as well, sire that's going to have a great career. But ultimately, Pinatubo I thought was a bit disappointing. I thought he'd every chance. It doesn't look like he's trained on to much extent anyway, but it was very, very nearly an Aidan O'Brien win in the Guineas, and Frankie Dettori on board. That would have been quite a story, albeit there's no one there.
The Bundesliga scores: Bayer Leverkusen 1, Bayern Munich the leaders 3, Eintracht Frankfurt 0, Mainz 1, Fortuna Düsseldorf 1, Hoffenheim 1, and RB Leipzig 1, Paderborn 0. At half-5 is Borussia Dortmund against Hertha Berlin. Some text in here on 53106 and some tweets out off the ball on the 1978 World Cup. Hi guys, first World Cup I really experienced. Incredibly exciting seeing the exotic foreign players. Loved Argentina, Kempes, Cubillas goal, and Peru kit goalie called Dropsy. Redhead Boniek, Scotland being the only familiar faces we knew, although they tanked when they really should have done better. Thanks to you all, the OTB team, when these World Cup reviews getting us through the lockdown. That is from Senan. Thank you, Senan. I stayed up late as an 8-year-old to watch Italy beat Argentina 1-0. Am I correct to recall Roberto Bettiga scored the winner? That is from Aaron. Yes, I think you were right, Aaron. I was 8 years old. The biggest memory was the ticker tape of the final. Always remember that. Is from John and Killarney. Kempes was great, as was Luque, but tried to find a goal scored by Argentina, which did not include the wonderfully created of Ozzy Ardiles. He was the heartbeat of the team in '78. That is from Tony in Wexford. Argentina, amazing people, but poorly run country. Football, the only escape for the people. No money in football, so they cannot keep good players at home. It was one of the biggest economies in the early 20th century. Was at a Boca game. You have to go there. Oh, the wine and the steak is amazing too. That is from Joe. And lads, yeah, like Luque was playing for River Plate, so was the keeper, Filal. But Mario Kempes was the top scorer in Spain. He scored 28 goals in 34 La Liga games that season for Valencia.
Yeah, he was the only sorry, John, I was going to say he's the only overseas player in the squad, and this was part of Menotti's plan that prior to, when they from the long lead into the tournament, he didn't want any of their players to go overseas so they could prepare them at home. But Kempes was the one exception that was away. And I mean, it is striking watching the footage that he was involved in all the major moments in the latter stages. He didn't score in the groups actually, but it was more that he came to life later in the competition. And it was clearly a very good Argentina side. I mean, they had good players, and obviously this was the trigger for Ardiles and Ricky Villa, and a sort of a piece of Spurs history, and Passarella, who I think was it John Giles who gave him a big mention a while back, who was like the legendary sort of captain enforcer figure of the team, and they would have played Ireland in 79 and 80, so clearly we were probably happy enough with the regime at the time, which wouldn't be out of sync with our history either. But the fact is that Peru game is still, and you talked about it before the break, and we are trying to move on from the politics a bit, yet like that is the most famous game of the tournament, was the Argentina-Peru game, where Argentina needed to win by 4 clear goals, and they scored 6. And the FIFA film, it's there's a line at the start, because Peru hit the post with 2 minutes, after 2 minutes, and I think there was a line in the film about, well, Peru were giving it their all, or words to that effect, as though people think that the reason that match fixing happens in world football and hasn't gone away is because people are quite good at it. So they tend not to make it too comedic. And if they make it too comedic, it's a bit of a problem. And I mean, listen, there's still we still have to give people the benefit of the doubt, but
it wasn't the keeper. The keeper was born in. It wasn't the keeper. The keeper couldn't.
It's never just the keeper, John.
Yeah,
it can never just be the keeper.
This is the thing, Dan. You basically, people don't understand. You really only need 2 players to fix a game, and they can do it in a reasonably subtle way as well.
But they went into at the time, Peru was also in under a regime which wasn't too pleasant, and I mean, there's been documentaries made about this. There's a film made about this. There's a senator who spoke about it a couple of years back. There is the fact that Videla went into the dressing room with Henry Kissinger. I mean, just like you say it out loud, and it's like,
all right, lads, how's it going? You look forward to a good game?
Who's that? That's the local dictator, and oh, that guy was Secretary of State under Nixon. Not that I'm not sure the Peruvians wouldn't be up in there on the Watergate now, but still, like it is sort of you can't avoid the fact that Peru were a good team. Like Peru had beaten Scotland 3-1, who were a good side, even if they were overconfident. Okay, Brazil had beaten them comfortably, and Argentina screwed over Brazil here by scoring more goals than they did. But I mean, they capitulated completely. There was prisoners going back and forth between Argentina and Peru, and this was tied in with that because a lot of the questionable regimes would have worked together. There was a story about a massive grain shipment being involved. There was a visit to the hotel, I think, a couple of days previous as well. And there is no doubt that the Peruvian performance was out of sync with Peruvian ability. And it just so happened that the team run by a dictator hosting the country managed to somehow win 6-0 to get into the final. I think the speculation about it, sometimes where there's no smoke without fire, it's actually true.
There is the possibility that Argentina would have been good enough to get the required victory, because in fairness to Peru, like watching their goals they conceded against Brazil, they weren't great defensively, and it's not inconceivable.
You can have a result. I mean, Holland hammered Austria 5-1, and Austria were atop their group, so it can happen. But it just everything around it suggests that the Peruvian team didn't put up their best performance on the day.
Yeah, but this basket case situation. Now, this World Cup, these were the days of the two groups, which was before my time. I wouldn't be a fan of it at all. So it was like 16 teams, then it was two groups of 4, and the winners would go to contest the final. But not only that, the Argentina were basically able to delay the Peru game such that they knew exactly what was required. So FIFA ended up changing the rules, obviously a bit too late, such that the last couple of games would go on at the same time. And then when we get to the final, I mean, before the final, they ended up objecting to this really spurious case of one of the Dutch players having some sort of strapping on his hand for an injury, and they did. I think the game was delayed. First of all, they came out late, 5 minutes late or something like that, like Dominic Cummings, albeit not quite as late. And then they objected to your man with the hand wrapped, and also the atmosphere. Albeit, I'm sure a lot of the crowd hated the regime. They didn't hate their football team, and the atmosphere at those games, as Micheál Murphy was saying to me, all the paper and the ticker tape, unbelievably hostile atmosphere for the Dutch team, and at the same time they very nearly did it, but it's a very, very tainted World Cup, JD.
Yeah, just to mention some of the other teams as well, like Austria beat Germany for the first ever time. Hans Krankel was a really good footballer, scored like some incredible goals. I was even looking at the Austria-Germany game, the 3-2 win over West Germany. 2 absolute cracking goals, and he ended up at Barcelona. The Germans didn't seem like a happy camp. The Dutch effectively eliminated them with the 2-2 draw. Beckenbauer was paid to go to the New York Cosmos, got a huge deal to go over there, and no player was allowed to play abroad, according to the German FA. Gerd Mutter retired by that stage. Italy seemed to run out of puff, but they had really good players, and they were kind of working towards the situation where they'd win it 4 years later. They'd Rossi, they'd Tardelli, they'd Bettega. They beat France 2-1. They were looking like potential finalists. But just before we go to the breakdown, Ari Hahn's goal was the winner against Italy, and you've got a kind of funny story, I think, on Twitter about that. But we'll come to that after the break. We just got to take a break here in a moment, in 30 seconds. We'll come to that after the break. It's quite a good story about Holland's win over Italy. This is the World Cup chat about 1978. On the Argentina-Ireland connection, lads didn't remember the Christian brothers, but they influence and introduce rugby to Argentina, the Christian brothers. Augustin Creevy, the most capped Argentina rugby international of all time. We're back after the news on 53106. This is Off the Ball Saturday.
News Talk Extra, our email newsletter straight to your inbox. Sign up now at newstalk.com/extra.
Afternoons are easy with insuremyvan.ie, Ireland's low-cost van insurance specialist. Get your business back on the road with Insure My Van's best price guarantee. For super savings, visit insuremyvan.ie. City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as insuremyvan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Milk meets tea. Yogurt finds fruit. And the cheese makes the toasty. Calcium for bones, protein for muscles, and the vitamins and minerals our bodies need. Quality grass-fed butter for cake making and bread baking. Dairy, Irish, locally farmed freshness. For information on the role of dairy in a balanced diet, visit ndc.ie.
We're all on a journey to brighter days that lie ahead. At Toyota, our journey started more than 20 years ago with a dream of a cleaner, better way to drive. Now, Toyota self-charging hybrids cut thousands of tons of CO2 from our atmosphere thanks to Ireland's Toyota hybrid drivers who've made the switch. So harmful emissions will be lower and the days ahead even brighter. Toyota, built for a better world.
At Specsavers, we're now open with 3 new ways to look after your sight and hearing. In store, where we're following all the recommended safety guidelines. At home, where you can get help via phone or video call from the comfort of your sofa, front room, or wherever you're most comfortable. Maybe not your bathtub though, for video calls. Not a good idea. Oh, and online, where you can order glasses and contact lenses straight to your door.
Specsavers, open with you in mind. Book an appointment online or call your nearest store.
The big summer save from Lidl will help your family save some serious cash. Get the barbecue ready for great deals like 4 100% Irish beef quarter pounders, soft brioche buns, sliced mild Irish red cheddar, Cania tomato ketchup and crispy butterhead lettuce, all for under €7. We'll be putting those in the grill ourselves to celebrate Lidl being awarded Ireland's most reputable supermarket in RepTrack's 2020 results. The big summer save at Lidl. More for you.
There's never been a better time to get Air's totally unlimited broadband for just $29.99 a month for 12 months. Sign up today and you'll also get thousands of movies, TV series and amazing Amazon originals on Amazon Prime Video. On us for a whole year. For more on this amazing offer, call 1-800-500-300 or visit air.ie. Air. Let's make possible. Price for new customers, 12-month contract, subject to availability. Bundle activation fee may apply. Full details and terms, see air.ie/Prime Video.
COVID-19 has had a huge impact on our country. But thanks to your patience and sacrifice, many thousands of lives have been saved. And while the virus is not yet gone, we have made enough progress to enter phase 2 of reopening Ireland. It's important that we continue to work together to support each other and our communities. To stay safe, you need to limit where you go and limit the number of people you meet. Here are 5 things you should know for phase 2. 1. You may travel within your own county and up to 20 kilometres from home if crossing county boundaries. 2. Indoor or outdoor social gatherings of up to 6 people and outdoor training activity for up to 15 people are now permissible, while always maintaining social distancing. 3. All retail is reopening, but please shop safely, shop locally, and support businesses in your community. 4. Working from home must continue wherever possible. 5. Please walk or cycle if possible, and only use public transport if absolutely necessary. As Ireland opens up, please remember that social distancing, coughing and sneezing etiquette, and washing your hands regularly are really important things we all must do to make sure the virus does not spread. Stay safe, stay local, we're in this together. Full details of Phase 2 are available now at gov.ie/Phase 2. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
Supercharge your home with 1 gigabit Sky broadband for ultra-fast streaming, browsing and gaming. And with award-winning Sky TV, sit back and enjoy the biggest and best shows. So watch unmissable Sky TV, stream with 1 gigabit broadband, and at just €50 a month, save a massive €612 a year. Search Sky 50. Availability subject to location. New customers only. Setup fees, minimum term and further terms apply. See sky.ie/speeds.
From music to rock out to, chill out to, and dance to. From sweater weather to workout playlists. Whatever mood you're in, Go Loud has music to match. Download the Go Loud app now or add us on your smart speaker. Go Loud. Podcasts, radio, and music to your ears. Go Loud!
Across Ireland. This is the IMRO Radio Awards Station of the Year. This is News Talk.
It's 4 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Suzanne Byrne. Protesters have surrounded the American embassy in Dublin for a demonstration against racism, the direct provision system, and in memory of George Floyd, who died in police custody in the US on May 25th. Speaking earlier, Health Minister Simon Harris said he'd prefer people to make their voices heard by writing to the US ambassador rather than gathering for a protest. But a crowd of at least 600 is gathered in Ballsbridge today. Lucky Kambouli from the Movement of Asylum Seekers in Ireland found himself almost drowned out by chanting when he tried to address the crowd.
We are here today not by accident, not by any chance. We also from Ireland want to...
George Floyd, say his name! 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 George Floyd!
Meanwhile, Washington is expecting its biggest demonstration yet today as mourners prepare for a second memorial service for Mr. Floyd. In Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has joined demonstrators in taking a knee outside Canada's Parliament in solidarity with the protesters. Thousands of people are also demonstrating in central London. This man said making his voice heard is more important than social distancing rules.
I hope everyone will quarantine off this, but I think Black Lives Matter is more important than quarantine right now. There's a lot of discrimination going on in the world and it should be addressed.
The Health Minister is pleading with people not to clock up contacts in phase 2 of our exit from lockdown. The reopening of the economy is to continue from Monday, with many non-essential shops opening their doors with staggered opening hours. Minister Simon Harris says people don't need to rush to stores as they will remain open.
So the shop that opens on Monday will be open again on Tuesday, it'll be open again on Wednesday, it'll be open next Monday. So we don't need to rush there at once. And when we do go there, we need to keep our social distance. Things like face coverings, I am concerned, needs to be a greater use of them, particularly around public transport. We don't need to try and clock up lots of close contacts because we do know that of the new cases in Ireland, around 60% of them are from close contacts.
And finally, driver theory tests and NCT checks will be able to be carried out from June 8th. Not all centres will be able to reopen, with the Department of Transport advising people to check its website to see their local centres. Transport Minister Shane Ross has said they're looking at all available options to allow driving tests to be carried out. That's your news update. It's just gone 2 minutes past 4.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. For great value van insurance, go online to the aa.ie.
Tonight will be mainly cloudy with some clear spells. It'll be drizzly along western and northern coast. Lows of between 7 and 10 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
You are welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you 3 till 5 o'clock in the company of the football correspondent of the Irish Independent, Daniel McDonnell, and the broadcaster and journalist, Johnny Ward. Remember, our football coverage brought to you with thanks to Paddy Power. For more information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net. You can text us on 53106. You can tweet us at Off the Ball. Now we're streaming live as well. You can watch us on the Off the Ball social channels for Periscope and Twitter at Off the Ball, on YouTube and on Facebook. And if you missed our Saturday panel discussion on coaching in Irish soccer with Niall O'Regan, Jason Donoghue and Pearl Slattery, you can check out the podcast of it on our brand new OTB Sports app. Download it now for iOS and Android. Search OTB Sports in the App Store. Really good stuff in the app and really worth downloading. We're delighted to have launched it this week. Text in the World Cup. A few weeks after the final, I saw Ardiles and Villa making their Spurs debut against Bohemians at Delman Park. A great World Cup, but it should never have taken place. That is from Kieran in Dublin. It was a real coup for Spurs to get the pair of them to go to England. And it's bizarre, but they really did make an impact to Villa in the FA Cup in 1981, and then Ardiles was effectively there for a decade and was a major influential player on Spurs.
Yeah, coup was probably the wrong word to use, John, but it definitely was. I mean, and we think of Ozzy Ardiles as well. The fact that he ended up sort of managing Swindon and sort of like embarking on a very sort of different path probably in his football life than he would have expected. And you remember more than me, because you probably, I don't know, did it influence you in terms of getting into Spurs or whatever? And I was only born in 82. I don't know if you remember the 81, the Ricky Villa run at the time, or was it something you just grew up watching afterwards? But it obviously must have been hugely exciting. There would have been a slight influx of foreign players around that time, because you would have had Arnold Murin and various people dropping in, but they were still the extreme minority, those overseas players, and then for them to end up there while the Falklands sort of kicked off. And Ardiles, I think you spoke earlier about the Argentina players and how they felt about it. I mean, this was like, he was college educated. Like, he probably did feel he had a sense of what maybe was going on and just couldn't accept. He sort of had to just wonder, was that the case? But Luque obviously denounced it a couple of years afterwards. But clearly with Ardiles, it set him off on an unbelievable journey.
Yeah, and I remember Ardiles, John, and I'm sure you remember quite well when he managed Spurs and just what was a very cavalier style of football.
5-4 every game.
Yeah, it was great. Klinsmann was playing, and I was infatuated with the Premier League at that time, and Spurs were great value. But you do have to wonder about the decision not to bring Maradona, because Maradona was 17 at the time and obviously was already known to be this prodigy. But when you do look back, you mentioned the pitches. The pitch was absolutely horrendous for the final and a lot of other games. But it was also very, very physical. Referees were fairly reluctant to give out cards. So it would have been intriguing for Maradona, as much as he would have had, the backing of an adoring fan base already, who would have just taken to this genius. He would have gotten kicked an awful lot. So it might have been a debatable decision not to bring him along, but he obviously came along subsequently. But Ozzy Ardiles was the man at that time, he and Kempes, and he did look incredible in that World Cup, to be fair.
Well, the Brazilians, there was a suspicion that they were deliberately sent to Mar del Plata, which had the worst pitches, to stifle their fluid play. They didn't lose a game in the tournament, but they were seen as quite a functional team. There was an unhappy camp. Rivellino wasn't match fit, it seemed. Didn't really turn up until the Italy playoff. Zico wasn't settled in the camp. Claudio Coutinho was the manager, but effectively he was being undermined and almost an overriding of his decisions by Admiral Nunes, the president of the federation. Once again, a military dictatorship calling the shots. Sadly, he lost his life a year later, Claudio Coutinho. And then
very sad, that, Judy. Yeah. He was. They were saying that they were burning effigies of him in the streets in Rio and so on. And obviously he was a derided figure, but Brazil were very unfortunate in that World Cup. Things went against them. There were issues, but as you say, then I think around a year later he tragically died. So it was a very sad footnote to a team that probably were better than Argentina, but just didn't get the look that the Argies got.
It's one of these Phoenix from the Flames was from the Baddiel and Skinner show in the 90s. That Clive Thomas, the Welsh referee, blowing up when a corner was taken in the middle of the corner, and Brazil scored out of it against Sweden, and it wasn't allowed.
That was absolutely bonkers. I actually watched the Phoenix from the Flames again as a kid. I used to love watching that show on Friday nights before the Premier League and the Saturday. And, the Phoenix from the Flames, these were characters that obviously were old for me. But, I think technically he kind of was within his right, but you don't give a corner and then blow up when the ball is essentially... Apparently he said it to the goalkeeper, he said it to the Swedish goalkeeper, I am going to blow it up. And if you note the Swedish goalkeeper, he doesn't really make much of an attempt to save the ball. But I don't think he ever refereed a World Cup game again.
Stephen from Dublin has just texted in exactly about that, the 1978 World Cup memory. I remember Rob Rensenbrink hitting the post against Argentina in the final with 2 minutes remaining, 1-1. That is from John in Waterford. Let's hear some of the local commentary of that Argentina-Holland final on the 25th of June 1978 in Buenos Aires.
Gallego, juegue para Atlantis, devuelve para Gallego, cuidado, pelota para Ardiles, cuidado, se la lleva Ardiles entre dos, bien, buena gambeta, entra Luque, enganchó para Kempes, peligro, tiro, gol,
You wonder where that came from, guys, that kind of concept.
It's one for you, Dan, I think, is it?
The concept of the commentators just saying in South America, just go.
It's part of the whole experience, and it is, we spoke before about what was the local sentiment like during that. And I think Menotti in a speech before the final, and as you mentioned earlier, John, he was very much he was a left wing figure who I think even Videla was almost pragmatic enough that he knew he had to almost stick with him because he was good at his job and and he might deliver the win even if he wasn't one of them. But I think he did give a speech before the final about how this was for, like, you know, the taxi drivers and the labourers and the people that would be in the crowd in a football mad country, and that, you know, so they were still able to enjoy it. The people that were there. I mean, you saw in the official film the scenes of the final and whatever it might be, that there was still some joy derived from it. And the commentary experience, and you go to a tournament in like in Brazil in 2014 in particular, I guess you would be a small bit exposed to it, and it is like, it definitely does like evoke images of the sort of the passion of the crowd and the passion of the commentators, and even I mean, it's sort of a South American, Central American thing. Even that Maradona in Mexico documentary, which I recommend on Netflix, even if there's small crowds at the games, the commentator still has to let rip. Whereas I don't know, I can't imagine Dave McIntyre setting off that route now on a Premier.
He doesn't. Dave McIntyre doesn't need to.
Nathan give it a bash, actually.
Dave McIntyre doesn't, and Nathan, they don't need to. These guys are top pros. They don't need to. They don't need to put in goal. They can just do that brilliant 10-second rap.
John, I think they'd want to do it a bit more passionately than that now, to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still upset about Wichita losing.
Yeah, your mood has notably gone down since the Guineas, it has to be said.
Yeah, well, you know, that's the story of my life. The story of my life, lads. But the final was interesting in that Argentina scored first through Kempes. Robert Brink nearly won it for the Dutch. They'd Dirk and Inga scoring the equaliser. You just wish they'd had Cruyff, though. If they'd had Cruyff, they would have won the World Cup. And then in extra time, Argentina scored again through Kempes and Bertoni. And that was it. But in Russia, the Argentinian fans are the most passionate I definitely encountered. I thought they were incredible, and you just saw the ticker tape. I mean, for a scene, for that alone, you'd almost want them to win the World Cup just for that ticker tape celebration. Imagine being in that ground. And if there's one game in the world I would want to go and see before I depart this mortal coil, it's Boca Juniors against River Plate in the Bombonera.
You literally just took the words out of my mouth there. I'd love to see that game. I've been to a few fairly interesting kind of places around the world to look for, I suppose, a proper atmosphere. And you know, if you look up YouTube for the San Lorenzo fans, they have this chant. It's absolutely mesmerising. That just goes on and on and on. It's probably the best football chant I've ever found. But yeah, imagine the Boca, the River Plate, the iconic jerseys. Going to see Argentinian fans looking at their own. You don't really, you know, take much notice, I suppose, of South American football here. But the Dutch were up against that, John, as well. You know, if this tournament were played in Holland, in Europe, even, I very little doubt that the Dutch would have been able to beat Argentina. And part of the reason is they would have had Cruyff. The pitch was appallingly bad for the final. You know, you mentioned the time of year, but I don't know how they ended up playing on a pitch as bad as that in the final. And they hit the post just before the end of full time, the Dutch. And in fairness, as much as we've a lot of conspiracy theories, it looks like they were going to go on and legitimately win the game had that ball gone 4 inches closer into the goal. But Argentina won, and the rest is history.
Well, they've got out alive, though.
Well, yeah.
The presentation would have been interesting anyway, because I think that was the thing. That was even the fact that it's very hard for the Argentina players to go back and look at the photos, I think, of the final. I mean, like, you think of 86 and there's those iconic photographs of Maradona, but in 78, it's Vidala's right in the middle of it. So they don't necessarily, you know, it doesn't necessarily feature, I don't think, too, you know, prominently on their old reeling in the years or whatever, you know. It actually did. The fact that he was so to the centre of the whole celebration, you do wonder. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, what would have happened if that goal goes in? It would have been a more subdued celebration, or maybe for, you know, whatever Argentina player was deemed to have been responsible for their goal. You know, life could have got uncomfortable, because it was the goalkeeper a year later actually talked about leaving. I'm not sure what club the goalkeeper was at, but whatever club he was going to leave, you probably have the list there. It might have been River Plate, I think, but I'm not sure.
His Filial was at River Plate, yeah.
Yeah, but Filial it was, yeah. And the suggestion he was going to leave, you know, there was a gun put on the table, and he was told by the general, who was particularly passionate, well, you know, I could make life very difficult for you if you decided to do that. So he didn't. So it clearly did, obviously, you know, there was that influence that even the players themselves didn't feel fully safe after winning the World Cup, which probably shows you how how terrible a regime it was. But I mean, it is true. Like the other side of the post, and there might have been a lot of injury time, maybe. A lot of injury.
We haven't mentioned, JD, maybe that Tunisia were in this tournament, and I mentioned them for a reason here, because obviously they were the first African team to win a game at the World Cup, and just watching the highlights, this was a decent team. And Africa, as much as North Africa and sort of the rest of Africa is almost like kind of two different continents in a way, Africa really united behind Tunisia. But one of the teams they played was Mexico. Now, Mexico were pretty poor, it has to be said. But there was this utterly bizarre incident before. I can't remember who they were playing, possibly playing Brazil, but whoever they were playing, before the game, the Mexican players were all out in the pitch waving the Argentinian flag.
That's right,
amongst them.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely bizarre. Now, I was getting to thinking, what was the Mexican regime like at that time? Were they kind of, was this a nod to the junta, or what was it? But in any event, or maybe they just wanted the crowd to get behind them. But you can imagine the Mexican team waving this massive Argentinian flag before one of their own games. Absolutely bizarre.
I can't imagine us doing it in a World Cup.
Well, not an English flag anyway, but probably not any flag really.
To be fair, we did actually. Our team did give a salute in Germany back in the 30s, didn't we? And there was one or two players didn't partake in that. It was Jimmy Dunn, I think, and one or two others who resisted it. But we do have a habit of trying to ingratiate ourselves into the local tradition. So, I mean, if the Green Army had gone there in '78, I'm sure we would have gotten a couple of photographs and might regret it afterwards, to be fair.
Well, one of the interesting things I was reading up about, that the West Germans were visited in Cordoba by the former Nazi colonel Hans Ulrich Rudel, who organised Perron's Air Force. This is at a time when Sepp Maier was very vehemently against what was going on and regarding his participation in the World Cup, and he was one of the few people taking a stand. And of course, he had a lot of former Nazis going down to South America, Mengele being one of them at the time, and Eichmann, I think, was captured as well.
He was.
In that part of the world. Angels with Dirty Faces, A Super History of Argentina Football. This is from Jonathan Wilson. I remember this book. The quote about people who like football like Brazil, whilst people who love football love Argentina, has always resonated with me. That is from Tom on 53106.
Another thing that's quite interesting was I'm not all that aware of Argentina's colonial history or whatever, but they were very. It seemed anyway when Spain played, they were very pro the Spanish team, which is interesting. So they seem to be fully behind the Spaniards as well.
Lads, the Dutch had decided before the game that because of what was going on with Argentinian government, they were not going to accept the cup if they won. Their runners-up medals were sent to their hotel, that is from Ger in Kildare. Ernst Happel, who managed Feyenoord, Rotterdam and Hamburg to European Cups, was their manager, an Austrian manager. 1978, because this you were mentioning just before the break, because we ran out of time before the break, Dan. 1978 was the World Cup of long goals. I spent my childhood summers trying to recreate Ari Hahn's 40-yard bullet for Holland against Italy. That is a Rob in Dublin.
Do you not have that Orbis folder behind you in studio? It used to be there. It was a World Cup 90
I can't look now,
book.
but yeah, I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a World Cup 90 book. So I just mentioned this on Twitter last night that obviously wasn't born in '78, and you didn't have easy access to when you were growing up. You might hear about great goals, but it wasn't as if they were being repeated or you could get at them easily. So that 1990 book, it was like the Orbis album, so it was a part sticker album, parts like a ring-binded sort of folder. And it included like drawings of great goals or sketches of great goals from history. So the Ari Hahn goal was there. And I actually wondered, was it frame by frame? But it was actually just one photograph. So actually a guy posted it to me. He obviously had it and routed it out. And it was just like illustrating how this 40-yard free kick again, almost like watching a golf drive take off from the tee now, the flight of the ball. And I remember for years looking at it, wondering, I'd love to see this goal. And eventually, sort of a good 10, 15 years later, I think finally seeing it. But I think the Archie Gamble goal actually was, someone reminded me that was in it too. Again, that was more of a frame.
I have it here.
Yeah. Do you have it, John? Yeah,
the thing is heavy. The thing is heavy, I'm telling you. But they've got the Archie Gamble goal here. Yeah, I don't remember this, actually.
These were things of beauty. It sounds like you're really looking forward to the return of AstroTurf, Dan.
People who have it I think actually on social media, then there was stickers within it, I think, and the Hans Krankel one, there was two guys who 30 years later, it's like the two Millhouses meeting in The Simpsons. they both discovered that they had both missed this Krankel sticker. That was the one they couldn't get. Neither of them could get it. So anyone out there who has their old stickers, they could make these two punters out there very happy. They couldn't complete the full set because that was the missing piece. But that was the '78 World Cup for me growing up. It was the pictures of those goals, not actually having the footage to go with it until we could get at it easily years later. But
it's very good having here. Ari Hahn, Holland versus Italy, 1978. So your Twitter has become to reality. It's come to life. Your tweet, Daniel. Shoot on sight was the style of the Dutch strikers of the 1970s. Ari Hahn did just that in the 1978 World Cup finals in Argentina. Lots of did you know, as you say, the room for the photo there, the picture. Ari Hahn, date of birth, November 1948, club Ajax, other clubs, number of caps, number of goals. The action replay, Kroll to Hahn. This is very good. I should have got this back in 1990. I was stuck on Panini and a thing called Winners, the Champions of Sport. It was a bit more, maybe it was for people older than me. I was only about 11 at the time, but it's excellent, this Orbis book.
Take it home with you, John.
More of them.
You should take it home with you.
We have to keep the Off the Ball studio.
You'll never be seen in the studio again.
No. It's too heavy for me to take home anyway. I've enough hair in my head at the moment. So just some great tweets here in text here on 53106 and at Off the Ball on Twitter. We're talking about the 1978 World Cup in Argentina, part of our World Cup Revisited series. We've really enjoyed your company over the last few weeks as we prepare for the return of the Premier League on June the 17th. Just some Bundesliga scores. We'll come to them in a moment when they do go full time. Former Drogheda and Athlone defender Larry Corbally had a son born on the day of the 1978 World Cup final. Kempes Corbally would have a brief stint with Shamrock Rovers between 1996 and 1998.
I remember the name. I didn't realise that was the origin of the name, though.
I wonder was the horse named after him?
The Willie Mullins horse. He won the Punches Down Gold Cup, I think. Yeah.
Probably was, yeah.
Mauricio Pochettino's from Murphy in Santa Fe Province. Town is named after John James Murphy from Kilran, County Wexford, who did well for himself in Argentina in the late 19th century. Huge Irish influence in the country. That is from Tony Byrne in County Wexford. Love those kind of texts. People with the brilliant knowledge about history.
Well, did you see the Argentinian ambassador died recently, a few weeks ago, and she was buried in Foxrock in Mayo, which I think is a nod to Admiral William Brown, who would have, I think he set up the Argentine Navy, and he was a native of Mayo and has been commemorated in a famous ballad. And I have to thank Micheál Murphy for texting that in. But we do have links. Che Guevara was Che Guevara Lynch, wasn't he? He had an Irish background as well. And it's definitely a country I'd love to visit.
Yeah, the legacy, I think, of this World Cup, guys, is mass communication is so important. And it's just really, really sad what happened. And you have to think that it wouldn't happen now. Lads, there were 500 Dutch versus 80,000 Argentinians at the final. Bertoni, who got their third goal, says it was really another player for them. Dick Naninga, who scored the Dutch goal, said the first thing he did after the final was go to the dressing room and roll a cigarette. He was back working in his flower shop 2 days later. That is from Ger. This is Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. We're going to take a break. 53106. Back after this.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Jeff and Heskey.
Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
On the latest Tech Talk, Donny O'Sullivan of CNN joins me from New York to talk about the fallout between President Donald Trump and the social media giants. We'll hear from the company behind Golden Pages about their new business venture and learn all about collaborative robots.
Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
Listen and subscribe to the podcast now or tune in this evening at 5.
On News Talk.
Afternoons are easy with InsureMyVan.ie, Ireland's low-cost van insurance specialist. Get your business back on the road with Insure My Van's best price guarantee. For super savings, visit InsureMyVan.ie. City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as InsureMyVan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Panadol presents Homegrown Heroes. When communities come together, ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Meet Fergus Lennon, a volunteer with Blood Bike Leinster.
We started Blood Bike Leinster back in 2013. We transport blood and blood products and medical items between different hospitals.
The active ingredients in Panadol Extra Soluble relieve 5 types of tough pain to help you meet pain with strength and keep doing what matters most. Panadol Extra 500mg, 65mg soluble effervescent tablets. Contains paracetamol. Always read the label leaflet.
On Wednesday, June 10th from 5 to 7 p.m, National College of Ireland is hosting a virtual open evening where our lecturers and admissions team will be live online to answer questions about our wide range of full and part-time courses. To register, call 1850 221 721 or visit ncirl.ie.
Whether you're looking forward to visiting family and friends
or driving just for the joy of getting behind the wheel again, you'll find Peugeot has the perfect SUV for making those memorable journeys all the sweeter. The new Peugeot 2008 compact SUV, the full-size 3008 and the 5008 with 7 seats as standard, and all with our unique iCockpit interior. Take a test drive at your nearest dealer or visit Peugeot.ie. Peugeot, unboring the future.
COVID-19 is a highly infectious disease in our community. To slow the spread of COVID-19, everyone arriving to Ireland from overseas is asked to self-isolate for 14 days. All passengers must now complete a COVID-19 passenger locator form, which may be used to check that you are staying where you said you'd be. These measures will help protect everyone from COVID-19. You'll find answers to your questions about these new rules on gov.ie/locator form. Stay home, stay safe, protect each other. Brought to you by the Government of Ireland.
This is a UNICEF Ireland emergency appeal. 6,000 children could die every day because of COVID-19. Without urgent supplies of food and medicine, disaster looms. For just €40, you could provide life-saving support for children. To donate now, please go to unicef.ie or call 01-878 3000.
Are you ready to invent for life at MSD Ireland?
Hi, my name is Audrey. I started my career as an electrician. Now I'm in a senior role managing a team in pharmaceutical operations. I love my job and it's a role where I can truly be me. MSD has more than 3,000 people working across its network of 5 sites in Ireland. If you want to work for a diverse and inclusive company, then MSD would love to hear from you.
For people who want to impact tomorrow today, apply at jobs.msd.com/Ireland. MSD Ireland, inventing for life.
This Irish success story is brought to you by Guaranteed Irish.
Who would have thought from humble beginnings in a small-town butcher shop in the 1880s that Clonakilty black pudding would be exported around the world today? Supporting 50 jobs in the seaside town of West Cork, this family business and its famous recipe has become a local treasure, putting Clonakilty on the global food map. Guaranteed Irish helps you support companies that are altogether better choices for our communities. So look out for it. GuaranteedIrish.ie. Altogether better.
Home. Suale. We're at home a lot these days, but we can still explore with the TG Cahir player. Explore the home of Irish content. Home to award-winning documentaries, home to critically acclaimed series, home to culture, trad music and sport. Explore Ireland from the comfort of your home. Explore the TG Cahir player app. Now available to download for free. Gachot. Worldwide. TG Cahir. Sunna Suale.
On June 8th, horse racing will return behind closed doors. And while we're excited to get back to what we love, the safety of everyone involved is our priority. So we'll be following government guidelines, restricting attendance to essential people, implementing social distancing, and using the latest health screening procedures. Around the racecourse, surfaces will be disinfected, hand sanitising stations will be set up, and signage will be there to ensure hygiene standards. For more on how we're keeping racing safe, visit hri.ie.
In this week's Sunday Independent, explore the world around you with the first of 3 great posters featuring Irish garden birds, butterflies and wildflowers, free to collect. OTE's Brian O'Donovan reveals the family man behind the reporter in Trump's America. Best-selling author Eamon McLeod compiles a must-read A to Z of normal people. And in sport, Micheál Marhertig reflects on his legendary life and times. The Sunday Independent, real stories worth paying for, in print or subscribe at independent.ie.
This summer at Centra, we have everything you need. Like Centra barbecue meats range, mix and match any 3 for €10. Tato cheese and onion 6-pack, only €2. And Griffon Prosecco, only €9. Centra, live every day. Enjoy, call sensibly.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Duff and Heskey.
And you're very welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through to 5 o'clock in the company of the Irish Independent football correspondent Daniel McDonnell and the broadcaster and journalist Johnny Ward. You can text us on 53106. You can tweet us at Off the Ball. You can watch us on Periscope, on YouTube, on Facebook as well. You can listen to us on the new OTB Sports app. We've been speaking about 1978 Argentina World Cup today. Just a text in here, really good one on 53106. Love the chat on the 1978 World Cup. Ozzy Ardiles signed for Spurs after that World Cup. I saw him play his first game for them in pre-season friendly against Bohemians at Diamond Park. Also, Ardiles' shirt number was number 2. as they list the squad in alphabetical order. If their keeper wasn't called Alonso, would Ozzy have worn the number 1 shirt? That is from Jimmy in Glasnevin. And the League of Ireland, guys, Daniel, I know you've been writing a lot about this in the Irish Indo during the week. Why are we regarding a potential return to play? Is it more positive now given the roadmap from the government yesterday?
First of all, just to reply to that last text, Ardiles did wear number 1 in 1982 for that same reason.
Right, yeah.
So that text is correct. Where we are on the League of Ireland is, well, there's almost 2 separate debates ongoing with the League of Ireland, because there's the League of Ireland position, there's the FAI, the clubs, and it hasn't changed dramatically really, in the sense that the FAI are still trying to get a package together to convince the clubs to come back and play. But obviously what is changing is that you have the restrictions generally being loosened yesterday. And in some respects, that's almost, hurrying things along, or maybe altering perceptions, so that a couple of weeks back, the concept of, for example, playing games in front of spectators this year would have been considered a long shot. And the reason that would have been a long shot, whatever your view of it, it didn't look likely that there was going to be permission given for that this year, and that there would be a more conservative approach taken. So you had to plan really as though there would be no spectators going to games. Whereas I think now what's probably changed this week is that now really, and you can see the GEA are talking about it, that really it's implausible now, I think, that there isn't a serious debate and discussion about having spectators in games this year. The one slight caveat with the League of Ireland, of course, is that some of the grounds are so badly equipped, and this is obviously the great shame, is that while you can have restricted capacity, it's just basic facilities and hand washing and all the stuff that's going to have to exist for restricted capacities. It's one thing to talk about Croke Park and the Aviva and probably Tala and some of our better grounds. Some of the others, you only have 1 or 2 entrance and exits and stuff like that. So, it would pose questions of them. But at the same time, I think the reality that there's going to be spectators probably able to attend games this year should change the debate. And I think now some of the clubs who had very valid reasons and concerns about coming back this year, you would have Graham Cummins, even from the player view on, being very negative about it. I think now, for anyone to be talking about the prospect of there being no games to 2021, you might have looked rational at one point, but now it looks irrational to be speaking in those terms. And I don't think there's any real, excuse once the R rate remains steady and our general society, reacts responsibly. I think the debate about sport coming back is going to be brought forward, and really the League of Ireland now has to come back this year. I can't see any way that it doesn't happen, that it doesn't become a scandal if that's the case, because there are reasons now and reasons to be more encouraged, notwithstanding the FAI also have always had their own confidence, and whether you believe it or not. But I think now that you can add potential of fans coming into the mix, that should tip the balance towards a direction where it does return.
And Johnny, are you confident it's going to return?
Yeah, I would be confident. The FAI, to my mind, hasn't really led particularly well on this. I think there's been a lot of talk, but maybe not a lot of action. As much as I have sympathy for them in the FAI, this was a situation that obviously nobody could have predicted. And for the newbies in the organisation, they had plenty of legacy issues to deal with, not to mind this. And as Dan has said a million times, the League of Ireland is a very fractured entity. You've completely different run clubs in the same small division. So you have, from the outset, you have the top clubs essentially wanting football to come back. And disappointingly for me, I think some clubs edging towards no football this year, because it was made more financial sense for them in a bad situation maybe for that to happen. For me, the idea that there wouldn't have been crowds at games at all in 2020, now this is slightly with the benefit of hindsight, but I don't know how that was ever considered likely, because this thing was always going to evolve. Now, having said that, I didn't expect the raft of changes that the government announced yesterday, particularly after a week where we'd had 4,000 people marching and widespread ignorance of social distancing at beaches and so on. So the government's reaction is essentially, we're going to get the show back on the road here. And if you extend that to sport, John, I don't know if you're listening to Friday Night Racing yesterday. We had Joseph O'Brien on. If you're into racing, I'd highly recommend listening to back, because Joseph was a brilliant guest. But the racing restrictions that are being announced on Monday, from Monday at Naas, which were only agreed, 3 or 4 weeks ago, they seem absolutely fancifully archaic like 3 or 4 weeks later. That's how much the country has moved on in terms of the mentality of the people. And by extension, League of Ireland players, I spoke to Stephen McGuinness before the show, and he said, you probably need another survey, but there's very little appetite among players not to play. And, the FAI has spent, Dan would know more about this than me, but the FAI has spent a lot of money on testing, money that will probably look quite badly spent in hindsight. And I'm being a little bit speculative there, but I think it's money that possibly could have gone elsewhere. But, we have to get healthy people back playing. The issue of attendances, I always thought crowds would come back maybe sooner than others, but there are a couple of issues. If there are going to be crowds of maybe 25%, I think is what they start off with in Poland, 25%, 50%, that's not much good to a League of Ireland club, because you'd imagine a lot of them would be season ticket holders. I imagine elderly people will be very reluctant about going to games. People with underlying conditions, unfortunately, are going to be very reluctant to go to games. So I'm not sure how crowds will be affected by this, but I think crowds coming back is absolutely inevitable, because we don't seem to have an alternative in terms of the money that the FAI has come up with, which I think they're presenting to the clubs next week. The money it has come up with and the streaming sort of potential, I'm not sure where that's going to go. And it'll tell a lot about the FAI. Dan has a piece about the FAI issue in the Indo today, but it'll tell a lot about the new FAI, which is still an awful lot to prove, where it goes with this, because I think the League of Ireland has to come back ASAP. We've been very slow. We're the slowest summer league in Europe to come up with a plan. And I don't know. I think I'm genuinely astounded by what's happened in maybe the last 2 weeks in terms of the shift of mentality in this country. And all of this is good for the League of Ireland.
Well, that's because we haven't lived through this before. So we didn't know really how to be reacting in March at Cheltenham when this started happening that week. And
JD, March seems like years ago now.
March seems like it's been 1978.
Well, of course it does.
The year I was born.
We were inside all the time, and I think, to be fair, when we've had this discussion before, I know people who've followed Johnny on social media, he's been quite active on the topic, but my view on this always was not to get bogged down in predictions, because there was predictions going either way. The reason people were talking about no crowds in 2020, it's because it was being said in meetings. Ultimately that was the thing. There was a feeling that this would not be happening this year, but there was always the hope that that with time, knowledge would inform better decisions. But obviously, we were in a panicked situation, and probably still remaining it to some degree with the League of Ireland, because there comes a point where players need to know what they're going to do for the rest of the year if there's going to be no football. And also, as well, the wage subsidy is massive. Johnny's talking about what would the impact be of crowds and spectators coming in. It depends really on the wage subsidy, which we now think will go on until the end of August. That's the latest announcement. And once fans aren't coming in at 100% capacity, so clubs aren't operating at 100% turnover, then the League of Ireland clubs should still qualify for wage subsidy support. So therefore, it helps to bridge the gap, the payment gap for clubs who want to think about coming back. But ironically enough now, there would be an argument that while the wage subsidy exists, do you want to try and, in some strange way, get back quicker to exercise it while it's there? But I think at the same time, I'm very conscious here of declaring something over too. We still have to see where our figures are on this in a couple of weeks' time, because, just because the government have changed their stance and maybe the policing of something isn't strict, it doesn't mean that the problem hasn't gone away. So we have to see where we are in a couple of weeks' time before getting too far ahead of ourselves. But at the same time,
that's true, Dan. Yeah, that's why I'm slightly surprised by the raft of changes, because this isn't over by any stretch.
No, so we'll see where we are. But I think it's football as well. I think the lessons of other countries gives us a bit more confidence. And while I take the point about the testing and the money that the FAI maybe will have spent on testing, I still think, a couple of weeks back, there was an element of, would this, grow confidence? And maybe the fact that we know now that none of the players at the 4 clubs in Europe have it, and the staff have it. So clearly they had behaved in a way that was correct. They'd avoided the disease, that maybe that sort of, helps to build confidence generally. And I wouldn't also underestimate, and I did mention it in the piece today, that, the FAI are also looking at, senior international games, hopefully later in the year as well. And this pilot program, which shows that we can run a testing system here rather than just returning without any testing.
Yeah.
This pilot program can grow confidence for the return of support generally. But anyone who's listening, John, here, who's involved in amateur football, underage football, women's football in this country is still amateur. That they're not going to undergo the same level of testing. But if it could be shown that active sports teams, it can't be transmitted during games, etc., that helps everyone. So there was merit in that program, but they may have to review the extent of testing that's planned for these 4 teams, perhaps.
There's also merit in that there could be a second wave of coronavirus. So if you haven't got everything ready, the whole thing for me was this was 2 months of getting everything ready to a degree where let me just speak. To a degree where if I feel that everything with the health system is ready to be able to deal with the capacity of issues that they have, then we'll be able to work around this thing before we got a vaccine or some kind of way of treating it. And therefore, if there's a second wave in November or December, at least the FAI have invested in the testing and they know what the processes should be so that they can actually continue with the season or have another season. And maybe at a lower level, as you say, Dan, it might be like the GA have where they've got a supervisor, where they've got a questionnaire where people have to take their own temperature because they don't have probably the funds for it. And an amateur level sport, they can't have testing because it's only really for pro sports. Just on the Bundesliga scores, Bayer Leverkusen 2, Bayern Munich 4, Eintracht Frankfurt 0, Mainz 2, Fortuna Düsseldorf 2, Hoffenheim 2, RB Leipzig 1, Paderborn 1, and that means Bayern Munich are within 2 wins of winning the Bundesliga title. Johnny, you were going to come in on something there?
Yeah, it was a good point you made, John. I'm not criticising the FAI either because, hindsight is such a wonderful thing at the best of times. But with this pandemic, hindsight is, people were absolutely lambasting Cheltenham racegoers on the Wednesday who had said absolutely nothing on the Monday. And, this has moved quickly in that when the FAI was trying to get the show back on the road, the idea of no testing probably wouldn't even have been countenanced. For racing to convince the government, seemingly, to get racing back, and this is only next Monday, which is later than England, and it's still 3 weeks earlier than was originally planned, they had to go to these levels of testing people going to the races for temperatures and all this. Owners can't go. Trainers of a certain age aren't allowed basically go because of the government guidelines. All of these look absolutely bonkers now. And racing, we had an ad there on the ad break for racing in terms of the social distancing. We're just in a completely different era. So I'm not really criticising the FAI because this thing has moved so fast. But I don't think the testing long term is going to be overly extensive because you just can't afford it.
Yeah, where's the money, Dan, coming from for the support for the League of Ireland? Is there going to be extra streams of revenue or money at all or any kind of support from the government, from FIFA, from UEFA? I know we've had the bailout, but is there kind of a clear sense of where money is to support the League of Ireland through what won't be a full situation, as it were?
Yeah, well, so the wage subsidy from the state is massive because that's covering most of the professional wage bills at the moment. Not all of them. And obviously for clubs with a bigger wage bill, not as much as it would be for others. But that's the state element of it. And then there's Gianni Infantino was speaking again today, the FIFA president, speaking about how there's an imperative to get football going again and to help out. It's not just about top club football, but the lower tier domestic leagues. And throughout, there's been talk about a FIFA package coming, but I don't think that the FAI have ever been able to get the timeline on that clear. And there's always been a confidence that something might be coming in terms of support, but not sure when. So that is another element, but there is no doubt there's a broader picture here for Irish football that had there was a bailout in January, very high profile bailout, of course, rescue deal with the banks and UEFA and, with the state. And I mean, the pandemic has come along and hit them for 6 again. And there is no doubt that they now need more state support and everything that they're planning to do. And there is big changes coming down the tracks, and there's more proposals going to come down the tracks from the new FAI, I say, although to some people they still have to prove themselves that they're a different animal to the old one. That state support is going to be a massive element of it. And I think that state support and maybe the funds that they're drawing down from the state would have been a factor in the money that they're spending on testing. and that there would have been a state support element to that. Those two things will be interlinked. So they can't do it on their own, to answer your question. And they put a compensation package in front of the clubs a couple of weeks back, which wasn't very good as far as clubs were concerned. Next week is the key date, possibly next Thursday. And the hope is that they're going to come with a better package to the table. But it is very possible that all of a sudden this plan for neutral grounds, which would have been the plan for the rest of the season, I know clubs are starting to make inquiries to say, well, maybe not initially, but maybe at some stage, could we look at hosting games in our ground? Could we make a provision for that? What income could that bring in? And maybe that could bring things closer. But there is still clubs who have their own financial issues and question marks over whether they would want to return this year without extreme guarantees. And it possibly may well be the case next week that we're still talking about what happens if one or two clubs steadfastly do not want to come back, and what happens in that event.
The Premier League fixtures, we know the TV, I know you wrote about this during the week, Dan, that you might see it as a bit of a sugar high. Johnny, are you looking forward to the Premier League returning with the fixtures now that we know what they are?
Yeah, like it's strange to be honest. The lockdown has had an effect on everyone, and I've gotten used to doing other stuff. So I've kind of gotten used to football being gone, and obviously the fact that the Premier League, it hasn't been an incredibly exciting season, but I'm still looking forward to seeing it back. The behind closed doors element, I think it does impinge on your enjoyment. And the BBC getting games back, there's a bit of a novelty to it.
Will you pipe the music in? Will you?
I don't know. Like I do like kind of watching games without commentaries, but I prefer to watch a game with a bit of a crowd. So I don't know. I haven't really thought about that.
But harsh on Dave and Nathan, Johnny. Bloody hell! When you have a
well, this is it. I mean, when you see JD doing that goal impression earlier on,
well, that's why I never made it.
This is it. You've made it as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing it. But I am looking forward to seeing the League of Ireland more because with respect to the Premier League, the really important stuff is kind of decided, and the League of Ireland had just started, John, as well. I mean, it was developing into a fairly intriguing title race already, with Shamrock Rovers having been 3 points ahead, and Dundalk really only starting to.
Jordan Flowers, remember that was back in 1978. That goal.
Yeah, Jordan Flowers, Stephen McGuinness, Rory Higgins going to the Ireland setup, which hasn't been finalised yet, but leaving Dundalk, Alan Reynolds possibly joining Dundalk, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I was really, really enjoying the start of the season. Stephen O'Donnell, who's been on this off the ball a few times, taken over at St Patrick's. I'm a Galway United fan. We look to have a great chance getting promoted this year, and it was mooted yesterday that there was a potential that the First Division wouldn't even have a promotion aspect to it this season, which I thought was really, really basket case. So there's an awful lot going on. The Premier League, it will be good to get it back. It'll be a little bit difficult for Liverpool fans if they can't go on and after all this time, celebrate their team actually lifting the cup. But it will be good to have it back. And I do feel for fans though. Football is an incredibly important part of people's lives, and they have missed it an awful lot. And I hope
they've had the World Cup chats, lads.
Well,
they've had that,
they've had that.
Yeah. But how long is this going to go on? Even, I mean, we're going to run out of World Cups, aren't we?
Well, there's always Euros. There's always other things we can talk about.
There's only going to be one game on a Saturday. I mean, the point I made during the week is just that it's going to be brilliant when it comes back. I think it is, and there still is. I mean, Liverpool are going to win the league.
The Champions
doors.
League. I know the Manchester City's thing is a tricky one, but as a Spurs fan, I'm interested. West Ham, Aston Villa fans, plenty of them in the country.
Well, yeah, I think you've got from the Irish perspective. I mean, Sheffield United,
Wolves,
and Wolves. Matt Doherty, Enda Stevens, and John Egan, who I know was on with Nathan and McGoldrick. So there is going to be stuff. My point is that it's just the binge watching plan of it, and I understand it. When people needed a lift in morale, the idea of 92 games, a game every night of the week, 7 or 8 games on a weekend, in theory it sounds great, but I actually think it gets to the point where if a lot of the issues are resolved, that all of a sudden a weekend with 4 Saturdays, 4 Saturday games building up to West Ham and Watford, with all due respect, battling for relegation. It could end up being a bit flat. Actually, some of these Saturdays towards the end of the season, you've all these games going on at the same time, and what do scores elsewhere mean for this? We're not actually going to have that. It's going to be like a World Cup, except for some teams, or a lot of teams, they're dead rubbers. So I just think the excitement is going to fade pretty quickly, and there's going to be a lot of games where people are going to think, I might go outside and continue, riding my bike like Johnny has, or go for a walk or whatever. But at the same time, I think and they're going to be behind closed doors as well. So as spectacles, they're still going to be. So I just don't think it's going to be as captivating over a long period of time as it will be in that first week, 10 days back, when, of course, I think everyone will be drinking it in.
Good news for Shane Long this week, by the way.
Yeah, great news for Shane Long, and in fairness to him, the career he's had to get a new deal, you gotta really give it to him. And before all of this madness, we were obviously talking of the potential that he might be used in the Irish game. But I think Dan's point is very valid there. That my local pub in Rialto introduced this collect a pint of Guinness thing there during the week. So I got a pint yesterday, and I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I think when we go back and the pubs reopen, all these Irish lads who've been like saying, oh, geez, I can't wait for the bars to open, I can't wait for this. They'll go in, and after they'll be halfway through their second pint and be like, I remember this, yeah, actually it's great, but I think I built it up a bit too much. And I think football will be a bit like that. It'll be great at the start, but all these staggered games, a lot of dead rubbers. I wonder, will they look at the streaming of these games and look at the figures and look at the betting turnover on them and get these kind of dystopian notions of doing this more often to kind of enhance revenue for clubs and for streaming rights.
English football won't allow it. They won't allow it. They have to have their Saturdays at 3.
Yeah, hopefully not. So that'll be interesting.
It's testing the waters, though. I think it's a good point. Like that, they've broken with tradition now. For exceptional circumstances. But there would have been a time when having all these games on Sundays and Friday nights was breaking with tradition too. So it's testing a small bit, John. I do think I fundamentally agree with you that they will return to some traditions, but it definitely is giving them the flexibility to explore. And that extends to a lot of things around Europe that people are suddenly thinking about, TV games at 7 nights a week and whatever it might be.
You've got to be very careful what you wish for in that regard as well, because football overload is dangerous.
Well, I really enjoyed this afternoon, guys. I hope you did as well. 1978, something just to text a couple of ones to finish here. Howie lads, Boca Juniors versus River Plate would be a dream for us all. Last year I got to see River versus Newell's old boys, Messi's old club in Buenos Aires. The chanting was unreal. Got a private tour of Boca Stadium, La Bombonera, the chocolate box. The tour guide was telling me it's difficult to get tickets for the Super Classico, and unfortunately away fans from either side aren't allowed into each other's stadiums for the last few years, which would make the atmosphere even better. Still, though, it's the game in world football to get to. Someday, lads. That is from Brendan O'Daly in Grand Canal Dock. Thanks so much for your text, Brendan. Kempes was the only player to really capture the imagination in 78. John Jigger O'Connor played for Roscommon at the time, and during the summer he became the Kempes O'Connor. He even had the long dark hair complete with the hairband that summer. That is from Tony in Roscommon. Guys, we've got about 1 minute left. Thanks so much for today.
Yeah, Niall Dunn messaged me, said, do go to Argentina, Johnny. Amazing country. Did it myself on a round the world trip. Took in Bocavi River. It was an amazing experience, incredible atmosphere. But to be honest, frightening. Nearly died twice. And then he went on to say the locals love the Irish for the reasons you've mentioned today. And Conor Blessing, same he messaged on Instagram, said that the Spurs keeper Gazzaniga and Pochettino are from the same town, and it's only called Murphy.
There you go.
Get your head around that.
I'm just thinking of the stout you're drinking there, Johnny, yesterday.
Oh,
Murphy,
John, I'm not going to lie. I'm not. So I walked like the 7 or 8 minute walk maybe to my house, and all the males in the cars were looking at me as if I were Claudia Schiffer or whatever. But I think it wasn't how attractive I was necessarily, but the fact that I was holding 2 pints of Guinness.
Dan, I'm going to have a drink it now after this. You were drinking something last night. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't as nice as what Johnny had.
No, it wasn't, and I didn't have people leering at me as I drank it, as I drank alone while I had it. But a lovely image of Johnny going back to Claudia Schiffer. It's this lockdown has brought us to strange. It's brought us to strange places, John. People won't be looking at you on the street very
guys,
soon.
I'm going to love yous and leave yous.
See you, John.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Dan McDonnell and Johnny Ward on Off the Ball Saturday today. Don't forget Off the Ball Sunday tomorrow with Joe Malloy in the chair from 1 o'clock. Our feature football interview with the former Republic of Ireland international Darren O'Dea. American Chip Beck, remember him, features in Golf Weekly. Then there's a paper review with Dave McIntyre, the great commentator, and Mary O'Connor. And we'll be talking about the current state of the club and the schools game in Ireland on Keith Wood's State of the Union rugby show. So if you missed our Saturday panel discussion on coaching in Irish soccer with Niall O'Regan, Jason Donoghue and Pearl Slattery, or our World Cup 1978 chat with Dan and Johnny, you can find the podcasts on the brand new OTB Sports app. Download it now for iOS and Android. Search OTB Sports in the App Store. Thanks for listening this afternoon. Stay safe. Bye-bye.